If you've ever felt, or maybe you still feel, that holding yourself to a really high standard is just discipline and it's just how you're going to stay motivated and stay on track, then you have fallen into the same blind spot that I fell into when I was on my journey too. And I'll explain myself in a moment. Because essentially what it is it's perfectionism masquerading as discipline, as motivation, as drive. Because those ultra high, impossibly high standards, they take away from the reality of the situation. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you were to enter into a really high level competition. That's something that I have some experience with. Jiu Jitsu, the World Championships, Euros are fairly high level competitions. If you have this mindset that anything that's not first place is bad, so you get second or third, or maybe even fourth in a Jiu Jitsu competition, when in a division where there's maybe 50 people in the bracket. So that's still pretty decent, right? I used to be of the mindset that if you weren't first, then you were just first of the losers or second of the losers. Now, you listening to this, you might have a more extreme version of this, or you might have a less extreme version of this. But essentially, it's whatever isn't first is bad and needs to be improved. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, okay? That's not what we're here about at this channel. However, it blocks you from actually being able to see the good that you have achieved, the good that you have done. So when I had this motivation or this drive, whenever I would get on the podium or I'd do decent and I wouldn't win, it was just the same as me losing in the first round or the same as me getting submitted, right? Because it was still a loss. Now, what this was really good is it was able to allow me to learn and motivate myself from my losses even more. However, the bad that came of it is it meant that I wasn't actually able to recognize my progress and my process as well. But I wasn't able to recognize my progress. I wasn't able to recognize how far I came. I wasn't able to recognize the good in my performance. So what it actually led to was an incomplete data set, we can say, an incomplete system. And for a lot of people that I see struggling with this, the reason why I made this is because I'm actually thinking, or I was thinking of how my client, we'll call him Nick, used to be, is it's a problem that I see for a lot of people who maybe are high performers or maybe they exited that kind of world. You know, founders, technical performers, kind of like in let's say software engineering, or we say financial, corporate kind of high level performing jobs, or obviously, like I said, as a founder or an entrepreneur. These are very high stress, high octane professions where you need to perform. And it's very easy for these mindsets to kind of seep in and let the perfect be the enemy of the great or the good. Because what we need to recognize is this idea of imperfect, perfect practice. When I was able to implement this for myself, it meant that I was able to take the whole data set of competitions, of life in general, of business, right? I was able to take all of it and see that I could still take a lot of good from the performances where I maybe just didn't make it across the finish line. And with the example of Nick, with him, he was a high performer, used to be in fintech, did so well that he was able to not work for a few years. He was able to invest in high level or high ticket mentorships, reparenting, therapeutic modalities, spirituality. Obviously, we were able to do work together as well. And he was able to build a real deep place of inner alignment, internal alignment, right? Where he had so much complexity, so much wisdom. And also, it just felt really good to be him. So, like a ton of happiness and fulfillment, whatever he was doing. But when it came to the more messy areas of life, I call it embracing the chaos, like building a business, because he wanted to be a founder, and also like getting back out there when it came to dating, because when he was doing all of this and when he was also working at fintech, he was not able to focus on dating at all. He just didn't have the time. He was just so preoccupied, right? When it comes to these more messy parts, where there is more chaos, when there's more ups and downs, when there's stuff that you can't control, when there's stuff which is not just us sitting really nicely on the couch and doing a really good session with somebody or doing a really good session with ourselves, but it's actually us putting ourselves out there and getting a little bit exposed. This is where he was struggling because it felt so threatening. It felt so threatening to come out of that internal alignment, okay? Because that internal alignment, whilst it was great, it wasn't stress tested. So what we did with him was embrace this mindset of imperfect, perfect practice. And it's not just a mindset, it's also allowing that principle to go deeper into all different levels of awareness, all different levels of consciousness. So we're not just repeating it to ourselves like a mantra, because whilst that has some benefit, and you can say it's a more cognitive or a more behavioral modality in order to change, and those things can be really effective, we need to make sure that all of us is on the same place. So we're not just repeating it and forcing it down our throat. It's actually something which is arising from us, which makes it more solid, more stable, and it means that it's just much more integrated into our character. If it's more integrated into our character, then we just become that person who believes that. If we become that person who believes that, then we get all of the traits and the behaviors and the beliefs that that person has. And if that person believes in imperfect, perfect practice, and that you need to build on your failures and your mediocre performances and your good performances in order to achieve that greatness, and we're not letting perfectionism hold us back, if we become that person who has that section of beliefs and those sections of philosophy, sections isn't really the right word. How do I phrase that? Those sects of philosophies and beliefs and experiences, then suddenly we just become that person who's able to start a business. And with Nick, he has already become a founder and he's getting out there, he's doing workshops, he's working with one-on-one clients, he's able to support himself and he's able to build a life for himself that he wants, total location independence and financial freedom in terms of not having a boss anymore, right? And from my own journey, when I was able to implement this, first of all, it made competitions much more enjoyable. When competitions are much more enjoyable, I was able to do them more. When I was able to do them more, I was able to get more experience. And because I was enjoying them more, I was able to get more out of each experience each time. It doesn't just have to be with competition, it can be with anything that you set your mind to. Okay? That can be with work, or that can be with meditation. Let's say you want to start some therapy or whatever it is. You want to start learning about something, maybe philosophy, whatever's you're interested in. If you're able to enjoy that process more, you get more ROI out of it. But we have to make sure that the standards we're holding ourselves to are there to help us and we're not there to meet the standards. Because whilst it can be useful to have high standards, and I'm not saying to not have high standards at all, I'm saying to not let perfectionism get in the way or masquerade as high standards.